Hello, my name is Deborah Hurd, and it is with great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. This virtual event is a part of a year-long celebration in honor of the Department of Black Studies' 50th anniversary, of which I am project coordinator here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. This department has its roots in the political and social activism of the 1960s and 70s. It was established in 1971, 3 years after the establishment of the country's first Department of Black Studies at San Francisco State University in 1968. Like at San Francisco State and other campuses across the country, the founding of Black Studies at UNO was the result of a long process of requests, formal demands, protests, and sit-ins. The pivotal moment came on November 10th, 1969, when 54 Black UNO students were arrested for staging a sit-in in the president's office. The arrest of the Omaha 54, as they became known, galvanized the students in Omaha's Black community as Black civic and social organizations and churches mobilized to bail out the 54 and to stand behind them in their negotiations with the university's administration. One of their demands was the creation of a Department of Black Studies. 2 years later, in 1971, this department came into being. And 50 years later, we are here honoring the twin pillars upon which the discipline of Black Studies and this department was founded: academic inquiry and cultural relevance. We exist because of the courage of the Omaha 54 and the continued support and backing of the Black community in Omaha. We salute you both and we thank you. As a discipline that studies, analyzes, and critiques the continuing effects of historical enslavement, colonization, land dispossession, and corporate imperialism, we must acknowledge that this university and the very city itself sits on the sacred tribal lands of the Native American people for whom this city is named, the Omaha, and that of other First Nation people who regarded this land as their communal homeland. We stand in solidarity with you. And we stand in support of those who seek justice. We stand with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson in her quest for confirmation to the United States Supreme Court. Her historic nomination as the first African-American woman nominated to the Supreme Court, and her poise under intense partisan questioning is an inspiration for all people who wish to be seen, have their voices heard, and have their experiences considered at all levels of the governmental, political, economic, and social structures under which we live and define our very everyday lives. We send strength to you, Judge Brown Jackson. We support you, and we pray for your success. Now I would like to introduce to you today's speaker, Dr. Joseph Akpan. Dr. Akpan is an instructor in the Department of Black Studies and Political Science here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. He holds a BA degree in Political Science and International Relations, an MA in Political Science, and a Ph.D. in Political Science with a specialization in International Political Economy, all from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. He has taught graduate MBA courses in international business, such as foreign direct investment, theory and practice of international trade, and regional economic integration, as well as undergraduate courses in African politics, African history and culture, political science, and Black studies at institutions including the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, Offutt Air Force Base, and Bellevue University. In terms of service, Dr. Akpan was appointed and served between 2009 and 2011 as a resident scholar and consultant for the think tank, the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Kuru, in Nigeria. He collaborates with the University of Nebraska Lincoln's College of Agriculture and Food Processing Center to improve Nigeria's food production, processing, and packaging industry. In the business sector, Dr. Akpan has worked as a consultant for Pier 1 Imports at their corporate headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas, to facilitate the trade importation of large amounts of African arts and crafts from Zimbabwe and Nigeria for sale in the US and in Canada. In 2005, he successfully coordinated a major ongoing international investment project that brought foreign investors in to improve Nigeria's telecommunications sector. And finally, on a personal note, Dr. Akpan would like the audience to know that he loves soccer and he plays tennis. Welcome, Dr. Akpan. So before I turn the presentation over to you, I would like to ask you just a few general questions to get us started. So coming from Nigeria, what got you interested in studying politics?
Well, I believe my father was the one that he was a politician, and anytime he came back home after meetings, he would have me read some of the minutes that were discussed in the meeting. I don't know whether he was consciously or unconsciously doing that, but I became interested. So when I finished high school, he advised me to work at least for 1 year before going for further studies. So I worked in a British bank for about 8 months, and then I resigned and joined his business. He had a business of palm oil business. So I used to go negotiate contract for him with government agents. And so we used to get a lot of requisitions, a lot of supply of palm oil from them. So I became interested in, I became very interested in the business world. And so that is how I came to study politics, but not only politics, but also to study political economy, because political economy is an intersection, a junction between political science and economics. So I thought that you cannot really fully understand one without the other because of the interplay of political and economic forces. So I became more interested in that because it was some kind of a hands-on approach to understanding economic and political phenomena.
All right, so my next question is, in the history of African politics, and let's think about the independence movement from then on, so the move to decolonize. Mm-hmm. What people stand out for you as inspirations or people that you admire?
I would first of all start with Mandela. Nelson Mandela was somebody that I really respected, an African statesman, and there was a period that in the United States when I was here, I initiated a campaign for the University of Nebraska to divest from investors in South Africa because they invested a lot of money. And Annie Chambers, in the early 80s, I think 1984, was one of the people who was an instrumental figure in getting the state of Nebraska to divest from investment, but the university did not. So when I found that out, I started a campaign that was supported by some community groups, church groups, and the University Senate, also. So we had a coalition of people that came together with us and organizations that came with us. And then we tried to ask them to divest. Initially, they did not. Eventually, we brought people like Donald Woods. He was the author of Cry Freedom. That was the book that Denzel Washington featured, in terms of acting Steve Biko. So eventually, they divested a little bit, but they promised that they would use their mission to assist African students from South Africa to study here. At that time, I just thought apartheid was nearing an end anywhere. And so maybe that would be a good way to contribute. So I left, but that was very eye-opening to me.
All right, and my final question, What exactly is development theory, and what motivated you to focus on development theories in your research? And from this, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, development theory, when I got to working at the University of Nebraska political science, and I was lucky enough because at that time, there were not many universities that had international political economy. I happened to work with an instructor who specialized in that. I was interested, so I started taking classes and focused on the development and what other areas of development or geographic area would be of interest to me than Africa. So I focused on Africa, the entire continent, both Southern Africa, West Africa, everything. So I became very, very interested because I've still been fascinated or maybe curious why African states have not developed to some level of viable industrializations and developing other sectors. So that became my point of focus. But as far as the development is concerned, the concept of development is concerned, I am going to define that as we go along.
It's all on you now, Professor Akpan.
Okay. Now, let's start with what is development. You know, in trying to develop a general theory of international political economy, whether you are focusing on systemic level, that is the international level, or you are focusing on a national level, it requires a holistic approach that would try to see how political, social, and economic forces interact in a given political environment or in a given society. So, but the concept of development is sometimes very, very vague. It may be very broad and non-specific. So when loosely used, it may refer to one or more of the following concepts. Political development is one of them. Economic development is one of them. Modernization or development of social institutions. It may also refer to the transition of society from one historical period to another. For example, from pre-industrial to industrial periods since the word development will come up repeatedly in this study or in this presentation, it is necessary to define what is meaning, and as it will be used in this present context. I define development as increasing the capacity of societies to influence their future, politically, socially, or economically. According to Bryan and White, development encompasses 4 factors. First, it means increasing society's economic and political capacity and expanding its ability to effect change. Second, it means equitable distribution of income and resources. Uneven distribution tends to divide people and undermine their capacity to maximize available resources. Third, it refers to empowerment in the sense that only people with power and influence can put pressure on political leaders to make change or changes. Politics is defined as resolution of conflicts over value allocation. Thus, only groups with influence can effect distributional changes. And fourth, development means efficient exploitation of society's finite resources. The main thrust of this definition of development is increasing the capacity for people to effect change politically, socially, and economically. The choices made by a particular regime between economic growth and equity is sociopolitical, not an economic choice. Specific trade-offs emerge through the interplay of unique societal and historical circumstances, which determine the power structure and wealth. Well, not only the power structure, but wealth distribution of each country. They relate less to long-term sustainable economic development and more to the contingencies of policy choices, constraints within a socio-economic environment. Long-term economic development in a sustainable sense requires both growth and equity. In other words, not only the development of the economy, but also equity. Because if you have growth without equity, your strategy is not very good. And so these policy choices and constraints within the socio-economic environments involves long-term economic development in a sustainable sense and requires both growth and equity. As Broad and Kavanaugh note, long-term growth is in productivity requires effective demand, and also that is an increase in the purchasing power of the masses, because if there's growth but without equity, it would benefit only a few people, because to consume the goods and services produced, people would have to have the purchasing power. The masses may provide the immediate consumer market, but export markets are also essential to growth. But export growth alone may not provide the necessary conditions for internal growth. Forsyth, my former advisor, makes a distinction between economic growth and national development. Economic growth is associated with economic development, while national development refers to economic growth accompanied by internationally recognized human rights. So national development, therefore, is defined as growth with equity, civil liberties, and political participation. Forsyth also notes that modernization is a process of economic and technological transformation. Donnelly views industrial transformation as an evolutionary process through stages of graduation as the economy moves from agricultural phase through industrial deepening, or from a developing to a developed economy. So the definition of development so far examined converge on the following concepts. 1, economic growth, equity, political rights, and participation. Thus, economic growth in itself refers at the minimum to increased production measured in terms of GNP per capita. Participation refers to the right to participate in government decisions. Equity, however, is an ambiguous concept. Equity may be viewed as equality of rights, but what rights? These rights may involve equitable distribution of income or equality in political participation. So I don't want to go very, very deep into the various dimensions of development, but suffice it to say that for the purpose of this presentation, development means economic development, development with equity, sustainable development, and that requires strategy. So what I want to do today is to look at some of the international political economy concepts of what determines what makes a country grow. After the Second World War, and developed countries were very concerned about structuring the post-war international environment to at least foster growth, but they didn't know what to do with third world countries, how to carry them along so that they would not be left behind. 3 kinds of theories emerged. One was called Modernization Theory. And modernization, actually, this was a theory that was, I would say, initiated mostly from the West, United States and Western European countries. What modernization theory came up with was that African countries, it was not just for African countries, it was all third world countries, developing countries in Latin America, South America, and developing countries in Asia. A lot of them also, almost all of it, the African continent. So what they were saying is, as the term implies, modernize, move from an agricultural society to an industrial society. Let's move, transition from agrarian to industrial. What they did was government should hand over. Government should not be a part of promoting or taking part in economic development directly, but government can provide institutions, enforce contract laws, and also provide the enabling environment for multinational companies to come and operate. They had the capital in their own view, they had the technology, they had the management. So they were telling third world countries, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. Let the multinational corporations come in and help industrialize, but provide the infrastructure, necessary infrastructure for them to come and operate. This was in the 1950s and right after the Second World War. But the fault of modernization theory was that most developed countries have always started with agricultural development, processing, provide food for your people. And that would be the stage that some economic actors within the country would start to accumulate capital and then slowly move into industrialization. It did not happen in Africa and in many other third world countries, because what modernization meant was multinational corporations will bring in factors of production, assemble the goods in the countries, host countries, and employ very, very few locals there. So it did not lead to the economic growth that that modernization theory predicted or suggested. What had happened was that agriculture was left neglected. It was not advocating a balanced approach between industry and agriculture. So that remnant is still what is being suffered by African countries, because I want to focus mostly on African countries. So in the 70s, there came a group of dependency theories from South America, Latin America in particular, and then they said, no, modernization theory is wrong. African countries or other third world countries would not be able to develop under the international capitalist system, because through colonialism, multinational corporations, the colonial masters came and determined what crops to be grown, what crops to be expanded, and they were mostly interested in cash crop. They were interested in cash crops like cocoa, rubber, palm oil, cotton, and all those. Those were cash crops that were meant to feed the industries in Europe. Cash crop tended to take a lot of land from the indigenous people, but only very few returns in terms of income. So it left for the neglect. It made these African countries neglect their own food production. But what interest the colonial masters had was get the cash crop get the raw materials cheap from Africa, go back to Europe, process the material, and then re-export it to Africa. So it was like a triangular trade. Everywhere they won. They went to many, many countries, monopolized the land that could have been used in production of food crops and used that to produce cash crop. So even after independence, the dependency had deepened so much that they could not break away from that cycle of dependency. So dependency theories, they were very correct in understanding the structure by which African countries were dependent on the former colonial masters, and they are still dependent today. So the growth, the main intention was not to really industrialize Africa. It was to siphon raw materials from Africa to the West, and then the finished product also. That Africa was a source of raw materials, but also a source of the finished products. Up till today, when you go to Africa, you would hardly find any country that can produce and process their own raw materials. I'm talking about something like, cocoa, we produce in Africa, rubber, we produce in Africa, we produce cotton, we produce other raw materials. But none of those goods, is being processed in Africa, because the process of processing those goods are what add value. And in my research and in my own formulation of a theory, value adding is central to it. If you produce goods and you sell the raw materials, then you don't add value, because the process of adding value is what creates job. If you don't add value to it, you just transfer those things off as raw materials. And then when they come back as finished goods, you buy them, whether they're chocolate, coffee, or all those, rubber and all those things. You buy them at a higher rate because they go and improve the economy at the West at the expense of Africa, because Africa was not adding value to their own products that they produce. When you go and see the pattern of dependency, the pattern of underdevelopment, it follows this trajectory, because we have the goods, but we don't process it. We don't add value, so we don't create a lot of employment. So that is the best structure. But dependency theory also predicted that as long as African countries or third world countries were participating in the global capitalist economy, they will not develop, because the development of the West is at the expense of these countries. Well, that was proven a little bit, was proven wrong by some of these so-called newly industrializing countries like Taiwan, and South Korea, Singapore, because these people, they managed to produce, they managed to export their goods, they managed to add value to their goods. Interestingly, in the 50s, the GNP per capita of South Korea was about the same as that of Nigeria. That of Taiwan, about the same. But today, the GNP per capita of South Korea is not comparable to, they are very, very far off, away from Nigeria, much more developed than Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, other African countries. In those days, they used to say that when a country has raw materials, produces a lot of commodity goods or raw materials, that country had comparative advantage. Comparative advantage was a theory in international economics that says a country should export what it has comparative advantage in exporting. Well, from studying international economics, that has been modified. And the Japanese and the Taiwanese, Japan does not have as much oil as some of the countries in the Middle East or in Africa, but they were able to develop. Why? Then the theory of international trade was reformulated, still based on comparative advantage. What is comparative advantage? It means a country should intensively process, those are the key words, intensively process the goods with which that country is most abundantly endowed. So if you are endowed with the raw materials, oil, cocoa, gas, and then you don't process them, you cannot unlock your comparative advantage. That is where Africa, and especially countries in Africa, are. So I will come to that a little bit. So dependency theory was very correct in completely unraveling, completely explaining the structure of dependency that was created. Not dependency only on goods and services, but also on finance. They still relying on Europeans to come and provide them capital, when Africa has all the means to raise their own capital through their own products. So that was the missing link in dependency theory. But in explaining the history of dependency and why Africa is where we are now, that in itself, has eluded dependency theory. So taking the model of other developing countries or the so-called newly industrializing country, taking that further, then there came a third set of theory. The third one was, no, you cannot allow the market to do its things. Asian countries have demonstrated that the state needs to take an active role in developing the economy. There has to be a good marriage between the private sector and the public sector so that the state can, what people call engineered development. Let the state be a pilot. Let them be the ones that engineer the development. In other words, let the state focus on sectors that need to be developed so that it would act as a springboard for other sectors to be developed. And they can selectively, pick up the sectors, whether it is iron and steel. The state can provide a lot of money and ensure that when banks loan this money to private sector, the private sector can perform, and if they default, the state would guarantee that. So it was a marriage of the private sector, business, finance, and government sector that helped these countries. And at the time, they were not emphasizing what they call import economy, because Africa has been importing everything that they consume up till today. Even things that Africa can improve or can export themselves, even things that they could produce themselves, Africans are not producing. In Nigeria, Nigeria is dependent on almost every item for consumption, consumer items, on imported goods. So then that was the third one. Then what people were saying, okay, the Asian countries, the so-called newly industrializing countries, were embarking on export-oriented development. But what was missing in that description was the fact that it's not enough to export. Suppose we had been exporting, Africans have been exporting raw materials for a long time, but what was missing was value addition, value added. That is the process that creates job. Value adding, processes, value adding goods. So it is not enough to produce oil. If you don't refine that oil and use some of the raw materials to produce some things like fertilizers, or plastics and all that, you are missing out on some of the backward forward linkages that oil should provide to the economy. So my emphasis is value addition. That is where my thesis comes in, that I developed as my dissertation. I went to Nigeria. I had a field study, got a lot of data from Nigeria's central bank, other economic ministries, because I wanted to understand what is going on in Nigeria in particular, because if I understand that, I would understand what is going on in other African countries. So what I came to find out was that people say, oh, Africans are not united. Africans are they don't like each other. Well, I mean, I'm not buying that. I do know that Africans in general, they like each other, they interact with each other, but what is missing is the elites. Elites are the ones that make things happen. They are the ones that can organize society. They are the ones, just like Asian countries are doing, they are the ones that could, bring division and bring people together. So my focus then was that import substitution is not the best, because when multinational corporations bring technologies to the country or to the continent, they bring it at their own terms. They're not going to give you the technology, but they can come, produce there, assemble goods there. Imagine importing cars, automobile. Instead of the government will give the multinational corporations like the GM the monopoly to come and produce these cars in a country. But the car they produce are all imported parts from Europe, from America. So they come and assemble there in their factory there. And so when they assemble there, they don't even use local raw materials. They bring all the factors, all the different parts together. So it does not really employ a lot of people, because the steps that would have created some of those parts are being bypassed. Instead, we are buying those parts and then assembling them there. When you go and look at the number of people that they produce, that they employ at home, very small, because it's not dynamic enough to create its own momentum, to create its own demand. They said, okay, if we are looking for this, let's produce it, let's get the factors from home. But instead, everything is imported. So by the time they assemble, and I looked at many of those assembly plants, not only in cars, but in other sectors, I saw that the goods, when they are being produced in those countries, for example, in Nigeria, those goods are even more expensive than the imported ones. They would have even been better off if they imported the ones that imported from outside instead of assembling the parts there. It's a very, very negative, cycle of production and job creation. So my emphasis is that, my theory is that states, countries that intensively pursue, my general hypothesis, of course, cohesive states, emphasis cohesive states. You might say, what I mean cohesive states, I mean nation states or governments which promote demand-led strategy or value-adding strategy. They tend to promote or maximize development objectives. Again, my general hypothesis is cohesive states, cohesive countries, whatever you want to call it, which promote value-adding strategy of economic development, tend to maximize development goals. So what do I mean by cohesive states? What is cohesive? I'm talking particularly about political elites, who are the ones that are in government, and they are the ones that are responsible for, bringing, having a vision to develop their own economy and having a strategy to develop their economy. So again, my own emphasis is that cohesive governments that promote value-adding strategy of economic development in stable societies tend to really go very far or to maximize development outcomes. So what do I mean by cohesive states? Because I'm talking about political elite. Two things, two variables determine cohesive states. One of them is elite cohesiveness is the most important factor. If elites are not cohesive, if they don't work towards a common purpose, if they don't have a common vision to develop the economy, there's nothing. The masses do not do. It is the politicians, the political elites. They work with economic elites to have a vision on how to develop their own societies. So the first factor is elite cohesiveness. I'm talking about political elites. What determines elite cohesiveness? There are two things that determine it. First and foremost, elite unity. How do you achieve elite unity? There are some people that have, some writers have identified 4 different kinds of elite unity. First and foremost, developmental unified elites. They are described as people that are unified because of development goals that they have for their country. You'll see a lot of that. Because when I did the first study, I looked at elites, their behavior in South Korea, Nigeria, and in Brazil for comparative purposes to see how they differ. So developmental unified elites are those that are unified for the purpose of developing their own economy, and they have a vision on where to start. And then you have the consensual unified elite. They have unity in the concept, they have consensus in what institutions they want in their country, institutions that are positive, contributions to the economy. They're unified by common purpose, that although they may disagree on politics, but they are very unified in the kinds of institutions that would promote economic growth. We don't have that in Africa. You have that in the United States, you have that in Japan, in many other developed countries. But the only thing that Africa can start now is to think development and then agree what kinds of development they want. So I look at those as developmentally unified elites. Consensual unified elites, as I said, it's mostly in developed countries. We've not gone to, so even though the elites in America or Europe may differ in the methods of doing things, they are very unified about accepting the market economy as the pillar of the economic development. The third type of unity is ideologically unified elites. Elites may be ideologically unified, but they might have a few problems, but at least they're unified in the ideologies of what should be done in the country. And then the last one is the last facet of elite unity is the imperfectly unified elites. In other words, elites are not unified in the long term, they are imperfectly unified. And we saw this when African countries wanted to attain independence. And they were trying to pressure the colonial masters to leave their countries. Elites from all parts of society came together because they had a common goal. The common goal was to get independence from British or France or Belgium or whoever, Portugal, whoever was the colonial master at the time. But the moment they got independence, then they were not glued together. They did not unify long-term purposes. All of them started fighting each other because they wanted to get to government. They wanted to control the government. And once they wanted to go control the government, then they did not have a consensus among the entire society. So they tended to appeal their tribe to their tribal base. If you're an Igbo, you don't go to Igbo, and then you go to Yoruba, the Yoruba, so the country become fragmented on ethnic lines. And so people started to fight. So I don't mean to even minimize the importance or the significance of ethnicity. But ethnicity is not the problem facing Africa today. It's lack of elite cohesiveness. Because every country, including this country, they have ethnic powers, ethnic bases, and all that. But it didn't stop them. It doesn't stop them from progressing. Instead, ethnicity is used as a means of gaining and maintaining power at the expense of other ethnic groups. That is why there are so many problems. Not because people are fundamentally different between one ethnic group to another, but because leaders use ethnicity as a means, a stage of getting power. And when they get power, they try, other people kick against it because they play what I would call exclusionary politics. Exclusionary politics is something that is very divisive. There's nothing in ethnicity, and anybody who wants to read about that in the whole of Africa can just go to what is called Cultural Pluralism. There was a book, very good book written by Crawford Young, University of Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has really explored this ethnicity or cultural pluralism, which is in everywhere, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, almost every, did a great job to show that ethnicity is not the factor that divides Nigeria or Ghana or Ethiopia. Ethnicity actually is used as a means of attaining and consolidating power. But of course, when you attain power and consolidate in a multi-ethnic society, it's going to engender ethnicity. It's going to engender conflict. Conflict will come, because other groups also want to attain the same power. That is what is the cause of some of the fractionalization and fragmentation of politics in Africa. So I want, when people think about, talk about ethnicity, it's not an independent variable. It is an intervening variable used by what I call ethnic entrepreneurs. Ethnic entrepreneurs use ethnicity to fight for power. If they attain it, it does not even go to benefit the ethnic group that they come from, that they use as a tool for obtaining power. And so then after the unity, elite unity, the second factor that determines elite cohesiveness is elite coalition. What kind of coalition do elites promote in a country? One type of coalition is called distributional coalition. Elites come together for a common purpose of gaining whatever product the society produces and distributing it among themselves. It's a very small, narrow, exclusionary political base or coalition. Elite coalitions tend not to produce wealth. I mean, a distributional coalition, I'm sorry. They don't produce wealth because by the very nature When the wealth, when they see the wealth or they have the wealth, they distribute it among themselves. It doesn't really develop other sectors. It doesn't develop everybody in the society. It's a very, very, very distributional. It's a very exclusionary. Go and look at the country in Nigeria. Go and look at people who are having oil wells in Nigeria. It's a very select group of elites across the country. They have oil wells, and some of them are making like millions on a daily basis. And so these are distributional coalitions that doesn't help, but they also promote exclusionary politics and divisive politics. The second type of coalition was encompassing coalition. This concept of distributional coalition and encompassing coalition, they were all developed by Manco Olson. He's a very big, on coalition, politics. Encompassing coalitions tend to be, inclusionary. They tend to, promote distribution, tends to bring people together and maximize society's resources and wealth. So by its very nature, it encompasses most of the major elements of society. But in this project that I did, I identified that elites need not be, even if they're not encompassing, they need not be distributional or exclusionary. There can also be an expansive coalition. Expansive coalition has the potential to slowly grow to become encompassing. Expansive means it has the potential to grow, to bring people so that they can come, all of them can have a common goal of developing. So how does this cohesiveness at the state level, because when we're talking about state, we're not talking about an abstract entity. We are talking about elites who control the state. Those are the ones I'm looking at. I'm looking at the behavior of politicians at that level. And so, and what about society? Society can influence, if you come from a society that is disruptive, divisive, and all those things, what do you expect? The elites, unless there's a political mindset, a purposeful political engineering that, majority of elite or key, portions of elite in the society agree upon, then there are just elites are rational everywhere. So they play with the hands that they see that deals them. And so, or they're dealt with. So it's, if you have an ethnically divided society, you can see the elites who are ethnically divided. If you see places that people are fighting, elites will also try to fight in that to get whatever resources that they need. Once that is done, class. So let me see the indicators of cohesiveness in society would be class, religion. You talk about these people, Muslims killing Christians. It is not the Muslims, the average Muslim, as I say, follower, or it's not the average Muslim that is going to kill. They are responding to the politics that their own emirs, their religious organs play. There are some people today in many parts of Africa that if a religious emir goes and tell them, go and commit mayhem, go and demonstrate, go and kill yourself, they are ready to go and kill themselves because of that. So religion becomes a tool, a political tool, to gain access to wealth, to gain access to resources. So all these things, class, religion, ethnicity, external actors, including colonial actors. They are still in that mix. There is a Turner once said that most of the coups that Nigeria used to experience were masterminded by multinational oil interests in the Niger Delta. What does that mean? It means that multinational corporations, they are also a part of, when they operate in a country, they are also a part of society. And so some of them would even, they used to sponsor politicians. They used to even sponsor when coups and counter coups, coup d'etat, was reigning in Africa, where most of the rulers were military dictators. Some of these people were sponsored by multinational oil companies, so that they knew that if they came to power, their interests would be buttressed, their interests would be supported. So there's sectoral interest, there's regionalism. And so if you go to places like other countries that divide the countries into geopolitical zones. In Nigeria, they have about 6 geopolitical zones. And every year, every election cycle, every zone wants power to be ceded to them, because they believe that when you have political power, it translates into economic power, fueling all these divisive and violent encounters between different groups. So those are the interests that operate at the society level. That's why I call class, religion, ethnicity, neocolonialists. Neocolonialists are people that are still advancing the interests of the previous colonial masters. Sectoral interests and also regional interests. So, what are the strategies of economic development that I'm talking about? Economic development means the strategy of development I'm talking about is first import substitution. In other words, if you want to produce certain things in your country, instead of importing them all wholesale, bring the multinational corporations to come and produce there in your own country. When they produce there in your country, as I said earlier, they don't add value a lot, because they are coming there to take advantage of the market, and in fact, exclude other competitors from abroad from coming to invest in that area so that they could maximize their own economic gain. That is import substitution. And then there was also the demand-led institution. I reformulated demand-led, demand-oriented strategy, because it's not everything that people export has value added. If you export, as I said earlier, if you export agricultural produce, if you export things, raw materials that you don't process, you can export them. It could be demanded. It could be demanded by many countries and all that. But if you don't add value to it, you do not create economic, that multiplier effect in your own economy. So it's not the only strategy that I emphasize for African countries is value-added strategy. I don't know how many of you know that coltan is produced widely, mined in Democratic Republic of Congo. But you don't know the impact. From coltan, tantalum is extracted from there. It is also used, tantalum is used in cell phones, computers, cameras, and all that. This is a huge, mineral. But how many cell phones are produced in a Democratic Republic? People are dying, children are dying, trying to get access to go and mine these kinds of products. Coltan is a raw material. The same for all other. You look at Niger Republic, they have this thing, uranium. You go to South Africa, go to Southern Africa, go to the copper, go to gold and all that. Nigeria is importing a lot of raw materials, a lot of fertilizers to be used. The country does not even use fertilizer intensively because it's expensive to import them. But do you know, if you go to Edo State in Nigeria, you go to Ogun State in Nigeria, you are seeing a lot of phosphate. Phosphate is an important thing that is used to produce fertilizer, but we are not adding value. So my emphasis is, what is development? Indicators, GNP per capita, GNP by sector, growth rate, demand, consumption, all that. Those are indicators of industrialization. Those are indicators of development. So I hope have I run over? Okay, so those are the what are development indicators that I was trying to ramp up here. GNP, when you see electricity, education, when you see the development of the sector, when you see industrial, when you see economic development, you will find it, you will notice it, you will recognize it. In Africa, most leaders, when they get sick, even if it is headache, they go to Europe. Why? Because they rather go and put their money in Swiss bank, European banks. They rather go and put their money so that whenever there is a little sickness in the family, they run there. What about all the money that they stole? If they had just put some of it in their own country and build a good hospital, some of this medical tourism would not be necessary. And the only people that could afford medical tourism are the people that have money, that stole government money to begin with. So there's a lot of problem. So I don't want anybody to make any excuses for Africa. It is long time ago, they used to say when I was growing up in primary school, there was, the impact of colonialism, the impact of colonialism. Yes, I know, there's a great impact. Because if you are a person, a whole person, when you are growing up and your hand was cut off or your leg was cut off, your circumstances in life will change. You will not be the same person you are today if your hand was cut off. But some countries, Singapore, a lot of these people, they overcame that. Some of them were also products of colonialism, but maybe they had a strong culture to bind them together, and overcome the adversity and did what was necessary to develop for their own country. And so we don't do that. Africans are very, because we don't have that glue. We don't have that glue. And that was what Chinua Achebe was alluding to when he talked about, things fall apart and the center cannot hold. And that center was the belief system that was taken away, because belief system, like religion, is the glue that holds society together. And if you don't have it, it doesn't matter whether you bring, Catholic Church, Presbyterian Church, whatever you bring, if you don't have that belief system, I would think that the belief system is culture. We don't have an African culture. We have centers of different cultures, but we didn't have one that united us together. So I think it's probably about time and I think if we have that kind of center, we would be able to have this kind of a glue, this cohesiveness. I'm talking about elite cohesiveness that will provide the impetus for elites to be cohesive. They will have a general area of agreement with which to work with one another. And should I continue?
we're almost at time, and I wanted to leave leave time for a little bit of discussion.
Okay, all right.
I wanted to see if anybody had any questions, anybody in the audience. But one of the things that I wanted to follow up with you on, and I'm glad you brought that up about religion and culture, because it seems as if that's really the starting point, isn't it? For people to come together to decide we're going to develop, but this development is going to be equitable. It's going to develop for everybody. So that mindset, that's what's missing. So that what you were talking about with the elite coalition, the mindset that I don't operate just for myself and my family to enrich myself. We need to enrich the country. We need to enrich everybody. And I think that that's part of what's missing. So when I was listening to the early, when you were going through the development strategies, it seems that what was being pushed from the West is development in terms of capitalism. Like we want you to become a part of the market capital, global capitalist system. And we know that that's inequitable. There's no fairness in the capitalist system.
No, that's why it failed.
Right, so at that point already, it's failing. You know, Africa can't succeed because these big companies, these corporations are they were already coming in before the move for independence. So they were already coming in and extracting. And so now that extraction is, oh, well, we have renegotiated our contracts. So instead of this conglomerate owning the diamond mine, oh, we'll own it in cooperation with the state, with the government, you know, but we still know that who's in control of those diamond mines, and it's not the states where those diamonds are coming from. It's that corporation over in Europe that's still in control and making millions of dollars a year.
That's true.
So, but in order for us to really deal with, you know, pushing back against that, everybody has to be on the same page. We don't all have to agree how to do it, but we have to agree we need to push back for our benefit, for the nation's benefit, not for individuals, not for certain elites so that they can get wealthy. And so I was thinking,
I'm not hearing you.
Okay, yeah, you froze for a second. Walter Rodney, you know, he wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Underdeveloped Africa. It's a book that, you know.
And then you have Kwame Nkrumah, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism.
That's right.
So so even back in the 60s and 70s, they recognized that these wealthy nations were just still not going to give up power. And now it's not just the nations, it's these multinational corporations that are.
They're the I would say, perpetrators of neocolonialism, which means new colonialism. I think, you know, one of the things that really, W.E.B. Du Bois said in Ghana, that he said, it baffles him why African thinks that white people are benefactors. They are the people that really are you know, it baffled. I mean, when you come from a mindset to see how Black people fought for their own lives here to even stay human today. Sometimes when I look at some of the facts, some of the events that they went through, I'm just even surprised that there were up to even 100,000 of them left in this world, in this United States. And when some ambassador from, they came to give a speech, I think last semester at UNO, and I went there, and I was asking, why is it that maybe this government that are controlling the mining and distribution of revenues from vital commanding sectors of the economy. Why should there be that if this government are the ones controlling it, there's going to be corruption, systemic corruption, because the government, even when they are admitting foreigners to come and exploit, there are gatekeepers. You go and bribe them, oh yeah, you just go there and just devastate the economy as you want to. They don't really care. And the woman ambassador told me, no, don't say that. Because there are some people like Botswana government president that uses the proceeds from diamond to help their own people. And I wanted to tell her, but I wanted to tell her, ma'am, that diamond, 50% of the equity is controlled by De Beers, right. South African company. No, how many of the diamonds are being cut in Botswana? Mm-hmm. Who is adding value to that diamond? They are exporting all of it out. And then because the president is a, benevolent dictator, you can just give them a few, and they say, oh, he's a good man, he's distributing. But you don't know the structure of the economy. It's the same thing.
But the thing is, those countries don't care.
I know.
Because as long as they continue to have these people in power that they can, bribe, then they can continue the extraction.
Exactly. And that's what they want. The multinational corporations have played that game so far that if you go to some of these sectors in Africa, when you go as a Black person or as a Nigerian, you want to open your mouth, they can just dispose of you like that, because all they need is to tell their comprador, with a dependency theory is called them compromise elite. Those are the ones that they will use to finish it. And if you want to be very vocal, they can disappear. I've seen so many students here who came here and they said when they leave, they said, oh, when I go to Nigeria, white people are going to suffer. They go there, they run them out in no time because of those buffoons that they don't have any vision. They don't think about the future of the people. If you go to, when I left Nigeria many years ago, if you go to that place, things still remain the same, because they may make money, but it does not, change hands. It does not change hands. So
let me ask you this, and I'm thinking, and this kind of is a transition to talking about our upcoming webinar Thursday. I'm thinking about Burkina Faso and Thomas Sankara. And his philosophy was that for Burkina Faso, that they needed to concentrate on their country first. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, they needed to be self-sufficient. So he was like, why are we asking Western nations to do these things for us? Why can't we do them ourselves?
Exactly.
So something as basic as being in a village, well, how about everybody in the village come out and we all are going to dig a canal that we can use to irrigate crops, and we can create our own little, you can have your own little garden here. So starting off small, but trying to be self-sufficient, is that one thing that could be tried on the ground, is creating these little small, taking small steps, but independently, and then building out from there. Or do you see that if that was successful, they would do like they did with Thomas Sankara and, and eliminate?
Yes, Thomas Sankara was worshipped by the African press. They loved him because he was a breath of fresh air. And so, that is why people like that, when you want to come and change the mindset of your people and lead them in the direct direction, it becomes a danger to multinational forces that are everywhere. So they'll plot to eliminate you. And that is why that is why cohesiveness, elite cohesive, is very, because if you are cohesive in what you are doing, they will not be able to eliminate all the class, all those people. And so I always thought that there's a book called Small is Beautiful by Schumacher. And then he was talking about small intermediate cottage industry. He was talking about, what you were talking about. I also asked myself, I said, why is it that we have Ministry of Works? I mean, and also we also have the Army has, Corps of Engineers. Why do we need to go and bring some of these German companies to come and build road for us, and they charge you $1 million per mile? Why? Why don't you go to the village? We used to grade the road, keep it clean. You don't need to tie it, but create a passage from one place to another, because you have to link communities for any development to take part. Why can't you go and give the young men who don't even have jobs there, clear this bush? Though if you build from it, we pay you the money, so you keep the money there. Why can't you do that? Why can't you even after they pave the road or they clear it up, why can't you bring the Army Corps of Engineers to go and put bridges? Well, that is what they are for. In case you fight a war, you go to see where you cannot cross from one part to another, they build roads, they build the bridges. Why can't they do that? You can go to a particular community and put about 4 solar panels at night, and then you create a learning center there. You create a small shop, people come out. You create activities that can take part there and expand. Why can't they do that? So to me, I always think that development is a mindset. It's a mindset. And people who are able to, who can at least create this vision, they're not allowed to surface. So at some point, that's why you were asking me about 2 people. One of them was Thomas Sankara, that I talk more on Mandela, and then another one was Jerry Rawlings of Ghana. Jerry Rawlings killed so many corrupt people, and then at least his country is on the right path. The country is on the right path. So there are a lot of, you don't need to be very, very big. It doesn't, I mean, just look at what China did, in 1958, the Great Leap Forward. China determined that human beings, not capital, human beings are the bedrock of development. Start with what you have the best, capital-intensive projects. So you can engage the people, so you created communes and all that stuff. So why do you want to go and bring, capital-intensive technology that average people cannot absorb immediately? Start with what they can do, and then slowly, who used to think about China today, that China today would surpass United States in economic development? Nobody thought, but they started in the 50s, and then people were, they were saying Mao Zedong did not know what he was doing or was talking about and all this. And today, where is China today? People in Africa are still waiting for the big ship to arrive. Ship to be arrived. They didn't think the ship to come and cut off all those fat cats, all those corrupt leaders, Most of them don't even have elementary education, especially some of those that rule us during the military. It's a mindset, especially given the fact that we have the resources that we can take. And we can dictate the prices of what people want to pay. If we don't, nowadays, so I sometimes I get so frustrated that, why? This is not rocket science. I have seen how other countries have done it, and they're still doing it, and Africa is still left behind.
Well, I think about some of the, in Black psychology, within the field of Black studies, the Black psychologists, some of them were talking about psychological slavery.
Mhm.
And I think that we suffer from psychological slavery and psychological colonialism. So
Yep.
even though Africa is no longer colonized, the mind is
Oh,
being
it's still
colonized.
there. It's
So we
still
have
there.
to break that colonization of the
Mhm.
mind in order to
Mhm.
decolonize
Yep.
land.
That's true. That's true. And, there has to be some cultural revival. There
Yes.
has to be somewhere to start having a sense of, the colonial masters were very, when they demanded for independence, just give it to us, but instead pick the people that would rule so that they could keep their own interests alive for many, many, how many? Most of the countries in Africa got independence in 1960. But how many of them, are viable now? They have, because they gave them in a platter of gold. They didn't fight for it, so it didn't bring a sense of nationalism or a sense of nationhood among them. So I'm always thinking that there is no way that Africa is going to, it probably would take forever for them to, if they want, there has to be some kind of a spark, some kind of engineering element, whether it is violent or not. So many, this country, didn't they get independence at, at the price of spilling blood with British?
Right.
Sometimes people have to sacrifice, especially those that don't even have a clue of have the interests of the African continent or their own country at heart. It's sometimes it's so sad. It's so sad. It's like you feel defeated, but you know what to do, but you feel defeated. That is the part that really agonizes me.
Right. Well, Dr. Akpan, we've gone over a little bit, but I just really appreciate you doing this with us and bringing us all of this information. It gives us a lot to think about because the continent can't continue this way, for another century.
No.
Now there's colonialism coming in from the East. And as
Exactly.
Dr. John Henry Clark said, Africans have no friends. Africa has no friends. You have to go in with that mindset. Africa has no friends.
That's true.
So even though they claim that they're helping to develop, that development comes at a cost. So you have to be cautious about
why would it be in the interest of an outsider to come and develop your own continent?
Right.
Why would it be the interest? Look at all the sectors they've cornered. When they want to come and lay an infrastructure, a port or railroad, they bring their own people to come and work on it. And then their money. So if you don't pay them in 20 years, they take over. And then people are thinking that, China is too far away, and what can they do if they take over? These people have been building the South China Sea. They have been building their navy, their army, and all that. What do you think they're ready for? They're ready to take over hegemony, global hegemony from the United States.
And these countries that they're investing in will be able to sustain their excess population because, they've lifted the restrictions on how many children you can have. And they've already started allowing, paying some of their Chinese people to go in and establish businesses in these African countries. So yes, it's
the influence of China. In fact, even small things like selling T-shirt that should be done by local people. The Chinese have got some of them that are going without even visa. They're illegally going there. And when you go and look at details of businesses that workers, what Chinese, they're going to be the worst. They're going to be the worst. They didn't come there to come and develop you. They come there because they know that there are vast deposits of resources, minerals, whatever that they want. That's why they're coming.
All right. So let me let you all know about our upcoming lecture. Our next lecture will be on Thursday. We're having 2 this week. On Thursday at 6 p.m., we'll be having a lecture by Dr. Mariam Konate about how African heroic epics teach us about history and culture, a case study of Sundiata and Sarunia. So we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. We appreciate your presence today. Thank you, Dr. Akpan. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We'll see you.